Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast IDP edition. I'm John Macri, and I will be going over the top IDP takeaways from Week 13, a wild Thanksgiving week with every team playing. There was a lot going on this week, and we had a bit of everything. So we're going to hit on a lot of it here in our top IDP takeaways. And as always, if there are situations or players that I don't cover here that you want to hear more about, shout them out in the comments. I'll try to do my best to highlight them in some form. Otherwise, this will be our top 10-ish takeaways, probably a bit more than 10 this week. I think I had more than 10 slides. So yeah, I definitely had more this week with every team playing. And again, we'll cover a lot of the main takeaways, but everything will be in the IDP Fantasy Report, which will be out on Tuesday around noon Eastern time. That'll have snap counts, data, notes, waiver targets for the entire week, which you can get access to with a PFF Plus subscription. And for those who aren't subscribed just yet, today is the last day to utilize our Black Friday / Cyber Monday sale. If you're watching this on Monday, we have a promo code to save 35% off a PFF Plus subscription if you use the promo code SCORE35, SCORE35. That will save you a nice chunk of dough, and you'll get access to the IDP Fantasy Report, IDP rankings, the grades and snap counts live as well, and as well as all of our draft content too, which is coming up. It's going to really start kicking into high gear here once the regular season is over, and then so much more. So use the promo code SCORE35, get 35% off a PFF Plus subscription. All right, I am going to start with I guess I'll look back to Thursday night is kind of where I wanted to start, which usually I leave alone for this show because it's kind of old news by this point, but it's kind of important since it's a short-ish week for the Packers with them playing on Thursday again this week. So focusing in on the Green Bay Packers secondary, because this group has been all over the place this season, especially when trying to figure out who their starting safety next to Xavier McKinney is. So at least in this game, it was Javon Bullard, who has been a starter for 2 straight weeks now. He played over 90% of the defensive snaps, but there is a but, because this could be a result of Keyshawn Nixon having to play more wide corner, as the usual starter out there on the outside. Jair Alexander has missed each of the past 2 games, right? And Nixon usually gets a decent amount of work in the slot, but that has not been the case since Jair Alexander went down and has missed games. So with Bullard playing most of the safety snaps next to McKinney, Evan Williams hasn't been quite as involved either. He played 73% of the snaps, which isn't like he's being benched or anything, but for safety, when the norm is basically 100%, it's not ideal. Right now, we'll have to kind of see if when Alexander returns, how things kind of shake out. And he could very well be back this coming week. I'm not sure, but that could reduce Bullard's role a little bit as Nixon gets a little more work in the slot, with Bullard kind of helping out there. And then at safety, it might maybe gives Evan Williams a little bit more work at safety as well. But yeah, we'll probably only get a better idea once Jair Alexander is back, which is maybe Thursday. So yeah, Javon Bullard playing a little bit more in the slot, playing more safety, doing a little bit of everything, which he does, but getting more of that slot work without Keyshawn Nixon in the lineup is essentially, or he's in the lineup, but he's not in the slot. He's playing more outside because Jair Alexander is not in the lineup. So there you go. That was a lot. Obviously, hopefully that's clear. We'll cover it again on Thursday's show, just for those who might have missed it. But I also want to stay in Detroit for one more game here, because also from that Thanksgiving day, we had the Detroit Lions, who are worth highlighting here. I'm sure many of you are already aware of this situation, so I'll make it brief. Or maybe you're not, with Thanksgiving festivities getting in the way of getting you caught up. But Malcolm Rodriguez, linebacker for the Detroit Lions, tore his ACL on Thursday. That's going to end his season. So now the Lions are down another linebacker. They do have David Long, who they brought in after the Dolphins released him a couple weeks ago, but it was not Long that replaced Rodriguez once he was out of the game. It was actually Ezekiel Turner, which I guess, isn't all that surprising considering he's been there longer and the Lions, they've been a team that has clearly been one to value experience more than most at the position, especially experience in their defense, right? So with Rodriguez out of the game, there were 17 snaps on defense from that point on. Zeke Turner played 16 of them, so 94% of snaps. David Long did not factor in at all in the fourth quarter. So it feels like the Lions maybe aren't overly comfortable with David Long just playing like any key snaps just yet. And that game was close at the end. So for now, we have to treat Zeke Turner as the next man up next to Jack Campbell. It might not be like a 100% snap roll, but should be close to what Rodriguez was doing, which was closer to that 90% snap range, which could certainly be useful in deeper leagues. All right, let's go on to the Sunday games now and keep it going with the linebackers for a bit and look at the Los Angeles Chargers linebackers, because this group has been a one linebacker defense in recent weeks, and they still are. It's been Diane Henley. But interestingly, this week, Troy Dye played a pretty solid 76.5% snap share, even though that like last week it was mostly Nick Niemann. And Nick Niemann was active again. He only got like 3 snaps in the game, I think, in the third quarter. Denzel Perriman was also out for this one. So this was kind of a positive sign going forward, at least for Troy Dye, because Junior Colson's still on IR. Denzel Perriman is still hurt. Not sure when he's expected back. And then heading into a week where we'll have 6 teams on a bye, Troy Dye could have some IDP value in week 14, like as a desperation play. And if Perriman is inactive again, though Perriman really hasn't factored in here anyways recently, but we'll see. But now, like our most recent sample size here from this week is Troy Dye leading the team in tackles in week 14, but playing a pretty healthy snap share to make us feel a little bit better about him in deeper leagues again, right? Like this is also, it is a nice defense for linebacker tackles because they play so much zone, which we've talked a lot about in the offseason as far as yielding like higher tackle efficiency, but there's at least risk with Troy Dye because we've only seen it for one game, and last game it was Nick Niemann. But for those desperate for help in a crucial week next week, he at least appears to be the best bet right now in that second linebacker spot. So keep an eye on Troy Dye if you're in those deeper leagues on the waiver wire. Okay, on to the Atlanta Falcons linebacker situation, which we've kind of talked about constantly, in the preview show, because Troy Anderson has been questionable for a bit coming off injured reserve, and we haven't known exactly which week he was going to return, but it turns out that this was the week for Anderson to get back in the lineup. And the reason that this is important is because our concern with him coming back in was that it would affect Nate Landman, as Troy Anderson was likely to cut into Landman's snaps. And that did in fact happen this week. So hopefully we hammered that warning home enough that you were on the lookout and kept Landman out of your lineups. He had just 4 assists in this game. And the reason for that being that he played just 17 defensive snaps. So a 37% snap share. Meanwhile, Troy Anderson played a 35% snap share in his return. Obviously, this is brutal linebacker usage there outside of Caden Ellis, obviously, who played 100% of snaps. And with that, neither guy is really playable next week, assuming they're both active again. We just have to kind of avoid them for now, Landman and Anderson, that is. Okay, I included the Houston Texans linebackers again this week, only because Azeez Al-Shaair was ejected for a nasty hit that knocked Trevor Lawrence out of the game after just 19 defensive snaps. And the reason I want to look at it at all was just because there's already been talk about a possible suspension for Al-Shaair. Now they are on a bye week next week, so there might not be like a ton of urgency in adding his potential replacement, at least until we know for sure if he will be suspended or not. But either way, just in case, it was Neville Hewitt who led the way as a starter next to Henry To'oTo'o for the remainder of the game. Devin White played just 6 defensive snaps, so we don't have to worry about him. If you have the space, you could maybe add Hewitt as like a speculative ad for when waivers run this week. Otherwise, wait a bit, see if the suspension is handed down in case it's, prior to waivers being run, and then or after waivers being run, and then we could look to Neville Hewitt. So there will be another piece to this, however, because Christian Harris is also still kind of lurking on IR, where the talk was that he could be activated coming out of the team's bye week. I don't think he'll immediately get back in there, but just in case he does, we at least need to be aware of that possibility that he'll maybe get some snaps as well. But like I said, you can add Neville Hewitt, keep an eye out for a potential suspension if it comes before waivers run. You could just add him as a speculative add. If not, we could wait it out a little bit and see what happens. All right, next up from the snow game on Sunday Night Football, it's the Buffalo Bills, who saw the triumphant return of Matt Milano to the lineup, which was another thing that I had talked about on the preview show, where if Milano was active, which he had been trending toward all week, then Dorian Williams needed to be out of our IDP lineups. And hopefully you listened, because Dorian Williams did not factor in at all. Milano fully took over Dorian Williams' role that he had been manning all season, which meant that it wasn't a true full-time role for Milano, as he came off the field on obvious passing downs, just like Dorian Williams would be. And Terrell Bernard remained the green dot and played every snap. So Milano, interestingly, like prior to his injuries, he was an every down linebacker, but in all that time that Milano missed, the Bills kind of adjusted their defensive scheme to support like more defensive backs, fewer linebackers. And it seems like they might want to keep that scheme even with Milano back in the lineup. So maybe makes Milano more of like a deep league option right now. So as for Dorian Williams, it's good night, sweet Princeton, and we move on from him, barring another injury in this linebacker core. I wanted to highlight the Seahawks defense here as well, because it's also kind of somewhat interesting usage with them running a bit more one linebacker looks as well, after moving on from Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson, who were both full-time to start the year, and now they're not even on the team. So it was Ernest Jones leading the way again, playing 100% of snaps, and Tyrese Knight played a solid 78% as our deep league option. So that really isn't that interesting or different, but it brings me to their safeties, where we saw the return of Rayshon Jenkins last week, and he only played 50% of snaps. So wasn't sure if he was kind of being eased in or what the situation was. And I knew this week would give us kind of a clearer picture of what they would want to do with these guys. And it seems like they're perfectly comfortable with Kobe Bryant as the full-time starter next to Julian Love, because he once again played every snap, while Jenkins only got on the field for 40% of snaps. So Jenkins certainly needs to be on benches at this point, potentially droppable in most formats, while Kobe Bryant, very much a deep safety, can at least have some value in deeper leagues where just being a starting safety is enough to get a player on rosters. And then another situation worth looking at is the New England Patriots, who saw the return of Jabril Peppers this week, which I did not think he was coming back this season after being placed on the commissioner's exempt list for domestic violence. I figured they'd go the rest of the year without him, but he was quietly activated this week and not just played a full-time role, but played a full-time role as well. This was a defense that in recent weeks had only been deploying Kyle Duggar as a 100% snap linebacker. And this week, both Duggar and Peppers returned to their kind of full-time deployment that we had seen from them at the start of the season. So usage-wise, because of the way New England minimizes their linebackers, we typically get some good usage in the box for both safeties, and that was the case once again this week. So on first run data collection, it looks like Duggar and Peppers both played 52% of their defensive snaps in the box, and unsurprisingly, they were the two leading tacklers for the Patriots in the game. Peppers had 9, Duggar had 8. They obviously played 100% of snaps, but more than half of them were in the box. Obviously, we know Duggar is the starting IDP for us, but Peppers now at least has some value here again as a waiver target, considering the role, the usage, the potential for production. So that was interesting to see there. And then for anyone wondering about their linebackers, New England, that is, Jelani Tavai played 94%. Christian Ellis played just 68%. So slight bump for Tavai, but we've seen that fluctuate a fair bit. So still kind of treating him as we have been, unless we get some consistency there. Okay. Last week, we saw a pretty big shift in the Ravens linebacker usage with Roquan Smith out for that Monday Night Football game. And we talked about it on the preview show, how there was definitely more concern for Trenton Simpson coming out of that game, considering that he was very clearly demoted in that game, not just playing behind Malik Harrison, but behind Chris Board as well. I did say that maybe if Roquan came back, they'd go back to their usual usage, but it was definitely a risk. So benching Simpson was definitely the more prudent choice, and hopefully you did in fact bench him, because that demotion appears to be very clearly real here. Even with Roquan Smith back in the lineup, Trenton Simpson still played behind both Malik Harrison and Chris Board again. He finished with a 39% snap share, Trenton Simpson. Roquan played his usual 100%. Malik Harrison went for 68%, and Chris Board at 52%. So Simpson now probably droppable in redraft and most non-dynasty formats here, because they have a bye week next week, and we're not trusting him at all in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. So we need to make sure we'll have a more trustworthy option in there for week 15, even if it means swapping him on the waiver wire for a full-time player who's on a bye week in week 14, right? So like if Simpson goes back to a full-time role coming out of the bye, then great. If you really want to add him after that, then go for it. But it's definitely not worth risking it in week 15 after seeing this usage 2 weeks in a row now. Malik Harrison might be a fine kind of speculative ad, but really just for deep leagues, because he's not a full-time starter either. And there's at least some risk there with him as well. Sticking with the Ravens, Kyle Hamilton, we've talked about him a little bit here in recent weeks, highlighted him in the preview show as well, talking about his shift in usage and away from the slot and more of a typical safety role, which did keep him deep more often than not. And while he did leave the slot duties to Marlon Humphrey again this week, it seems like he did get a little bit more work in the box this week. Not official, as this data is still being reviewed, but it looks like on first run we have 41% of his snaps in the box, 48% deep, which is usage we could definitely live with kind of going forward. I know he didn't do much in this game, but that again, playing that deep safety role or typical safety role, that usage might shift a little bit week to week depending on the offense they're facing. It also, again, wasn't a great IDP performance from him, just 4 tackles in this one. He'll ideally have better days if they keep rotating him closer to the line of scrimmage, but can be treated more closer to like a safety 2 right now. Okay, I saved the best, or at least the most interesting to me for last, because on the preview show this week, I talked about how we should check in on the Bengals safety situation coming out of their bye week, because as we know, there's been a heavy rotation between Von Bell and Jordan Battle. So checking in this week, and it appears that the Bengals have finally given the reins to Battle, because he started this game and he played 76% of the total defensive snaps, while Von Bell played just 25%. It was only one drive at the end of the first half that Battle gave up to Von Bell. And then there was one other drive where Battle got hurt late in the game and Bell had to come in to finish off that drive. But Battle got back in there after that. Really, other than that, though, there was like just one snap here and there. Otherwise, we're looking at probably a near full-time role for Jordan Battle finally. The nice thing too for Battle is that on first review, again, we have him lined up in the box for 54% of his defensive snaps this week. So there could end up being some nice value here if the Bengals are finally going to trust Battle the rest of the way. And we should now be looking to kind of add him off waiver wires if you need the safety help through these final few weeks here into the fantasy playoffs. So that is pretty much it for me this week. Again, be sure to check out the IDP fantasy report. That'll be out Tuesday afternoon. I'll try to remember to put that in a comment and then pin it in this video. And then Thursday mornings, as always, I'll be going game by game in the IDP Start Sit show, and we'll cover plenty in there as well. So thanks thank you all for tuning in. If you would be so kind to like and subscribe to the channel, I greatly appreciate it. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps a ton as well. So thank you all again for doing that. If you have already, you are all the best, and as is the PFF data collection team, whom there would be no show this week, because we wouldn't be able to pull all this data so quickly following Sunday Night Football. So shout out to those guys and gals. Again, use the promo code SCORE35 to get 35% off a PFF Plus subscription. And I think that goes until December 2nd. So Monday is most likely the last day for that. So if you've been waiting to save money, now is the time to do that. And then, as always, feel free to ask questions in the comments. We'll see you guys on Thursday. And until next time, peace out.